I have 6 o'clock and I would like to call the building committee meeting to order. Let's see. And we do have a quorum. Have you all had a chance to review the minutes? Any additions to the minutes or deletions or corrections?
Make a motion to approve it.
Make a motion to approve the minutes. Second. Sorry, I caught his eye. I caught him first. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. We will move into our discussion items, and we'll start with the courthouse improvements here in this building. We've been talking about the windows for some time. Mayor, would you please give us an update on any new information you have in regard to our windows?
Yes, we're in contact with a gentleman named Mike St. John from East Tennessee. He was referred to us by Cope Architecture. That's one's been helping the school system with a lot of their projects. He came by and looked at the building and said, in his opinion, the windows needed to be worked on, but they didn't need to be replaced. He thought we could scrape off all the paint that's coming off, fix some of the woodwork, reseal around the caulking and other work on the windows themselves. He thought, being historical, that's probably going to be what the Tennessee Historic Commission is going to want. He thought that the windows needed some work, but they were not bad enough to need replacement. And he said it's going to be drastically less than having to replace all the windows. And he advised me to reach out to Tennessee Historical Commission, which I have, but I haven't heard back from them yet. He said I need to have them come down, look at them, and kind of verify that that's what they want to do. But he's almost 100% positive that's the direction they're going to take.
Members, what's your thoughts on this information? Yes, sir, Mr. Jewell.
Do we have anybody that will do that or is qualified to do that? Do we have any idea what it's going to cost to do those repairs? I know that probably the paint is lead-based. You're talking hazmat suits and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It could get very, very costly, even if you can find somebody that's willing to do it. But that's one reason we had abandoned that idea and went toward trying to replace them with historically accurate windows. But yeah, you can do that. And 5 years from now, you'll be doing it again. And 5 years from now, you'll be doing it again. And so but something needs to be done. They're going to rot out of the cases and fall on the ground if we don't. We've already had one at the front that either got knocked out, shot out, or fell out. We're not sure exactly what happened to it, but I don't know. Mayor, did you ever talk to the people that had come in and give us the information from Marvin Windows?
I did not talk to them again. I did, as the Tennessee Historical Commission and a Greater Natural Regional Council's historic person advised me to do, is have somebody come and look at them to see if they need to be replaced or not. That is a requirement from the Secretary of Interior standards for windows and historic buildings, is having them evaluated beforehand, not just come in and replace them. So it took us a while to find somebody to look at them and evaluate them. That's what his thought was. He advised me to contact Tennessee Historical Commission. I have reached out to them, however, they have not responded yet. Other than that, he advised finding somebody that does, a craftsman that does woodworking on windows, put out an RFP, have them come down to a pre-bid meeting, have them look at them, do an evaluation, and then come back and give you an estimate of what the cost is going to be.
Well, a fellow that did come from Marvin was a licensed architect that specializes in historical replications, and I gave you all my paperwork on it, all the buildings that they had done, including, I believe, the Capitol or the White House, some of the buildings in Nashville. John and myself met with them. I don't know whether he would meet their criteria, but if he wouldn't, I don't know how we're gonna find anybody that will. But keep on keeping on. We done been down this road before, but if you want to chase this rabbit, have at it.
Documentation you sent me did not include any qualifications for the architects. It just included price for replacing the windows. Again, I reached out to a person that was on the Tennessee Historical Commission who was working with Greater Nashville Regional Council's historic preservation person at the time. And this is the process they strongly recommended we follow to make sure we abide by the Secretary of Interior standards.
I honestly don't have a preference as to whether they're restored and scraped and putted and painted or whether they're replaced. I just hope that something can be done soon. And if, in fact, we are even going to have a chance at replacing them, time is of the essence. And we need to decide what we're going to do and get on with it, because they need attention one way or the other. Makes me no difference as long as we get them fixed. Yes, sir.
I have experience with old windows. You have an old building and it needs constant maintenance. And a problem in our county in the past has been we build something and then we won't maintain it. Now, in the 50 years I've lived here, we have had windows fall out, window panes fall out because we didn't take the trouble to repaint them and reglaze them every so often. You just have to do that with an old building. And now, is it expensive? Well, it's not going to be as expensive as putting all new windows in, that's for sure. But I just restored windows those windows in the old church date back to 1876. It can be done. It just takes time to do it. You had to, I don't know if you want to hire a company to do it or just hire an individual to go around and do one window at a time. Mainly, they need a little scraping and then reglazing and, and painting. And it can be done. We took off the storm windows because storm windows are fine, but the storm windows are actually compounding the problem because they're catching heat between the two panes. Now, if you check them regularly, you can use storm windows. But we also took storm windows off because they took away from the historicness of the building. But they were people were depending on them and letting the glazing crack and fall. And with these windows, what I had to do, I had to chink out every last bit of the old original glazing and put all new glazing in and sand mine frames and stuff. It can be done. I mean, if I can do it, anybody can do it. But now you may have trouble finding someone to do it. But this is a problem of having an old building. I don't care if you build a new house right now. You have to constantly do something, work on it. I have windows in my house. My house is 20 years old, and I've already had to replace the window sills and 4 windows. And it's a new house. Buildings require maintenance, and so you can't say, well, let's just put new windows in. That's not the cheap alternative. You still have to maintain them. I mean, they may be plastic and better, but you still maintenance. To have your authentic windows is worth the extra trouble. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. I recall restoring a house one time that was built in 1838, and I had a man do one window at a time, and he took all the glazing out, and he could do about a window a day, and it can be done. But as I say, I don't have a preference. We just got to do something and do something soon. Yes, sir, Mr. Buckmaster.
Out of curiosity, why is the Tennessee Historical Society involved in what we do with this courthouse? What benefit is there to us?
This is a historical building, and I'll let the mayor expound upon that if he would, please. Being a historical building, we fall under certain criteria that where we should report to them.
In 1995, the courthouse, along with several other buildings in the downtown area, were designated as part of a National Historic District. And your courthouse is the centerpiece of it. As being these designated contributing buildings, you have to follow the Secretary of Interior's guidelines to maintain the historical designation on your building. If you don't follow those, they'll take you off the registry. The Secretary of Interior delegates to states to create an agency to oversee that, and that is the Tennessee Historical Commission.
There are tax. Is red when it's on? Well, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, I thought red would stop. Anyway, there are advantages financially to being, but no, you don't have to be on the National Register of Historic Places. People call me all the time about that. And I say, if your house is on the National Register of Historic Places, it's just a stamp of approval. It's still your house. You can do whatever you want to with it, but they'll take you off the registry. The advantage of the registry is you can advertise this building is on the National Register of Historic Places. It's like a a grade A stamp. Then it also qualifies you for grants and stuff like that.
And certain protection.
Yeah, we could walk away from it and say, we don't want that approval. But it just limits you on mainly it is the exterior or why your building is on the National Register. So you see what you've done right here? Well, if the building were nominated for just this courtroom, they'd say, well, that's going to take it off. But we were nominated for the whole building and mainly for the exterior. So that's main. So when people buy an old house, they say, if you keep your exterior, that's why it was on the register, you're fine. You can do whatever you want to the inside. It's your house. And if you want to paint the outside blue, you'll lose that designation. But it's your house. You can do what you want to with it. So yeah, we could decline it and say we don't want it, but there are advantages to it. So it's up to you.
Anyone else?
So how many grants, how much money have we gotten from this historical society since, what, 1995 or whatever you said? What have we gained from it?
Do you know the answer to that, Ms. Dahl?
No, I don't. Well, I would say probably getting the courtroom redone was hinging on that. When we got the courtroom done, yeah, because we had a drop ceiling in here, so we restored the ceiling and painted and new floors, all that kind of stuff. That was a grant we got. Yeah, so that was some money. I don't know how much it was, but it was over $100,000. I know that.
So my final comment would be, we seem to want to pack people back in here again without fixing anything. Patching this stuff together, this patchwork last 2-3 years, so that we can remain on a historical landmark for actually what I see as no benefit. I'd assume we'd do it right as to just patch it back together. I don't care about historical designation. I want the building put back together if we're going to put people in it.
Thank you. And again, it makes me no difference as long as we take some action in one direction or the other. Do you need any action from this committee on this, Mayor, or is this something that you're ready to try to figure out for us in pretty short order?
Well, like I said, we put the RFP together and we can, now that we have a new system that we're using at the county called vendor registry, we can use that to try to find other vendors that maybe we didn't know about before as far as coming out, and put it out to bid and get that done. And right now it's just trying to make sure that we are abiding by what the historical commission wants, because as I said, that's the agency that's overseeing the regulation here in the state of Tennessee. That's really the holdup right now, is trying to get them out here to make sure that we're dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's and pleasing them.
Any further comment? Well, please do keep trying to reach out to them and so that we can move forward on this. Next item here, we have the heating and air system here in the courthouse. What have you been able to find out new in regard to that?
We had Mr. Gilmore, who does our HVAC work on it, came out, looked at the chiller. He sent me a letter recommending that we replace that. And as long as the other parts of the system he thought need to be replaced as well. Again, Cope Architecture came out one day, they were passing by and asked if they could stop by and look at it and just kind of give us an idea on the HVAC system. We walked them through the building. They looked at every room, went downstairs, looked at the boiler, and they said they were working on some kind of proposal they thought would work for us. One of the issues they said is for a room like this big up here at the courthouse, they said the problem is going to be trying to pressurize it so that it's pushing out from the outside air coming in so that the building can dry out. They said when you come in, you can feel the humidity inside the room. So, but they were working on that, put this together. Mr. Gilmore in the lower area recommended, he thought we could do a split system like they do over at the elementary school, that variable refrigerant flow system, I think is what it is. They thought as far as the addition to the wings here, they thought you could put them in. There's enough ceiling there that you thought they could put in the VRF units. As far as the rest of it, I'm not sure what that system will be. Like I said, Cope was putting something together, and they were out here, what, 3 or 4 weeks ago? And they were putting together a proposal they thought would work. So we're waiting for them to send us that proposal.
Thank you, Mayor. Anybody else have any comments about the heating and air system? Not moving on, the election office renovations, how are those coming, Mayor?
Yeah, I'm gonna turn that over to Mr. Slee. He and Danny have been working on that pretty consistently.
We've got all the floors flush and ready for hardwood. We've changed the lights over to LEDs where we could. We've got a couple of places that are going to require 2x2 LED lights instead of 2x4. In the vault room down the hallway, there's not a 48-inch span to put a 2x4 foot light in those areas. So we'll have to put a couple of 2x2s in there. And we're going to need a few more for closet areas and places like that. The air conditioners are going to be a big issue because there's puddles in the floor now from where they're sweating and running all over our fresh plywood. We've got 2 dehumidifiers down there running full time. We're wiping it up with a t-shirt 2 or 3 times a day and taking those out and wringing them out. I've talked to Mr. Gilmore about removing the one in the vault room because it's not running anyway. All it's doing is running all over the floor. So we're going to have to remove it anyway. The sooner we can get a decision made on some kind of HVAC in there will be better to help us get moving. Another reason we need to get it up and running is the hardwood needs to stay in there for 3 or 4 weeks, you know, to acclimate with the weather that's going to be in that room. And we can't take it in there with all the moisture that's in there now and then put a refrigerated HVAC system in there that's going to run a lot drier, a lot lower humidity. The floor won't ever be right if we try to do something like that. So I'd say we need to make a decision pretty quick on what we want to do. Either like Mr. Gilmore said, we may be able to put some cassettes in there on the walls like you see in not necessarily a motel room or anything like that. A good example is the elementary school. Another example is the janitor's closet over here at the CJC. It's a heat and air unit. The only thing coming in and out is not ductwork. It'll be refrigerant lines and an electric line. All the workings of it is outside as far as refrigeration. It's electric heat with refrigerated air conditioning.
Thank you. Any other questions in regard to the work that Mr. Slee and his crew have been getting accomplished? Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, there's still the request from the Election Commission to remove that one window over here, be facing Foxhall, and put a door there so they can move their election equipment in and out. You and I discussed that, and we're going to bring it to the building committee to get your thoughts on that. The Election Commission is pretty insistent that that is something they want. However, they don't control the building. So again, I was going to bring it up to this board or this body and see what your thoughts are on that.
What does this committee think about, it's a window now, correct?
Yes, sir. It's a window, and there's actually one of the fan coil units is right by that window. So you can take it out. I think Mr. Slee looked at it, said if you take it out, when you actually factor in that there's a drop there behind that unit, he thinks you'll have to put in some kind of window or something above the door because you won't have a door obviously that tall because it's what, 8, 9, 10 feet. So, but doing that, I don't think we would have to make it ADA compliant because talking to Mr. Paxson, the Election Commission, they just want it to load out that equipment. It's not going to be an entrance for people coming in, voting or anything like that. They're going to use this ramp coming in, the existing ramp. So I don't think we have to make that ADA compliant. But again, that is altering that part of the building and wanted to bring it to the election committee. The building committee. I know there'd been some hesitancy at one of the previous meetings about doing that. So I just wanted to see what the committee's thoughts are on that.
Yes, sir, Mr. Oliver.
I got an opinion on everything. The 2 things I'll say. One, the election commission used to be in this building and they did not need an extra door. Secondly, I would suggest that we just go ahead and run another election and see if they need a door or not, if they can function without it. If they determine they can't, then you can always add one a year from now. But I told them the other day, I said, if you work the election, you know, and I'm chairman of I'm like an officer for a specific location. They load you down with stuff the morning of the election. You got to go get it. That's fine. That's what you always do. But most of that, 90% of that stuff could be delivered the week before, day before, a couple of days before. You don't have to give it all out that day. It doesn't have to all be brought back that all, when you're reading, you're taking that day is your machine and your paperwork, you see. But they give you all kinds of signs and stuff. So there's an advantage to having, they think a door to load and unload people. But I think if they actually just plan what they're doing, they don't need that door. Now, I'm saying that because it would save you some money and a lot of headache. Then if you determine that, well, no, we need a door, then we say, well, all right, we'll look at a door again. But the election office used to be here. I was on the election commission then. I was chairman of elections. We did just fine. I think there may be, I don't know, obsessing about it, but that's just my opinion.
Mr. Oliver, Mr. Salee behind you wanted to be recognized.
There's the ramp at the back door would be adequate to do what they want to do as far as I'm concerned, moving the equipment in and out. I don't think we planned on putting up an extensive ramp out the new door. It would be steps. It definitely wouldn't be an ADA compliant ramp, so it'd be something that'd have to be modified later down the road. Also, they do have volunteers this time of year, those times of years to help them move stuff in and out. It's twice every 4 years. Public Works could help for an hour or two, to help get the stuff in and out. It'd be, anything would be interfering with that window. It's not part of the historical part of the courthouse, but the guy that was here the other day, and I can't remember his name, the mayor knows, but he said that those windows would fall under the same category just because they were as old as the 60s, that they still fall under the same category as these windows. So damaging one of those could affect anything to do with going forward with the Historic Society.
Anyone else have a comment? I do think that we this committee needs to give some direction to the mayor in regard to this issue. The chairman of the election commission has been most insistent on this. I don't really see where the door is necessary, but I know that that's been something that they have really been insistent about. So it's got the mayor he doesn't know which direction to go in. So we do need to give him some, let this committee's will be known on this. Yes.
I'll make a motion to leave it like it is, or not putting the door with I'm agreeing with Mr. Oliver on his thoughts on it, and Mr. Salee too.
Do we have
I second it.
we have a second with Mr. Noller. All those in favor of just leaving it as a window for now and not putting a door in, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say no. The door will not be installed. Thank you. That helpful to you in that regard, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Bubba. The next item we have here is sure, go ahead.
Another thing that we've talked about with the mayor, and I'm sure he's brought it to you guys before, is the ceiling tile inside those 3 offices. It's a drop ceiling with just a very little spot above it. When they put the drop ceiling in, they didn't remove the ceiling above it. And what's happened is all of that stuff is deteriorated into dust and falling on top of the drop ceiling we have now. That's causing the tile that are in there, the 2x4 perforated tile that you see all over downstairs, to sag. And it's also, we have a lot of moisture in that part of the courtroom that's causing some other issues. The problem is we can't move forward with painting that either, we want to repaint the chair rail. We're going to brighten up the entire room, but we can't paint any of this and stuff until we get something decided as far as what you're going to replace the ceiling tile with. We've got to tear not just one ceiling out, but another ceiling above that out to do away with all this dust. And we just don't want dust and trash all over the brand new paint job. So we got to do that before we can take another step and start getting some of this painting done. So if there's any ideas or any recommendations y'all would like to bring to me about what kind of ceiling tile you want, I'd like to get something on that. I don't know what's above it. I really don't know what's above it. Right up above it, 8 inches above it is pegboard. It's just the holes punched pegboard that's falling away. And we hadn't messed with enough of it other than just putting in the lights. We've cleared out that spot. Of course, not paying attention to what's above it. I would say it's some kind of a painted, maybe drywall, maybe mud. I don't know.
Okay, I restored a house built in 1840 and they had put a drop ceiling in, worst thing they ever did. I just pulled the whole thing out, went back and replaced the original ceiling or patched it. I would say it might be worth it to look and see what it may be the less involved of all of it. Your light fixtures, I don't know about them because they're probably attached to that drop ceiling, don't they?
Well, the conduit's there, the actual water lines that run these units here are in that ceiling. So it's going to be a lot of exposure of different kinds of pipes, fittings, fixtures, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they do that. They do that in some places and they paint it all one color and just live with it. But now, it's up to you what you want to do, but I would suggest that you look at least in one part of it, maybe one small room, tear that drop ceiling out and see if it's worth working with. That's just my suggestion. That's what I would do, because I'm going to have the same problem in the museum room. It's going to be the same problem. I would rather it be restored to the original ceiling. You may find it's less work in the long run. You know, they did that. They did that in here, the drop ceiling. You know, they did that to save energy, I imagine. But sometimes it's just a gimmick. Like you say, it just made the situation worse. So
if we tear it all out, we defeated the LED lights. I mean, they're hanging on the track that the ceiling tile hang in. They're 2x4, the same size as the ceiling tile that are in the drop ceiling. So we've defeated that.
Yes, Mr. Joel.
Well, the mayor and I had looked at some ceiling tiles, some 2x2s that were reproduction of stamp 10, and it was a plastic, so it wouldn't be a subject to moisture and the sagging. I don't know that it would structurally be any heavier, but that I know is an option. I mean, there's different grades to the ceiling tiles. Some are made for wet areas, some are not. It may be that you have to go to something that's designed to be used in a wet area so that it doesn't absorb water and it won't sag as much. So I think the drop ceiling is still probably a good option, but I understand what you're saying with everything falling down on top of the cliff. And I know we're going to have to replace probably all those ceiling tiles in there anyway. So it may be that we just need to look at one that's a little more waterproof or something. Is it more in the newer section or the older section that the problem is? Do you know? Right. Now, you know, you can take your tiles out and leave the grid up, probably, and paint it before you put new tiles in. And if there's anything in there loose, you can knock it down, could you not, before you put the new tiles up in there?
That's our goal, is to get that done before. All I did was make the statement that we need to make some sort of decision moving forward, because we need to start painting and get that kind of stuff done. Sure. I understand that February is the dead date, but I don't want to be picking up rags and sweeping the floor in February. You know, I kind of want to get this done.
Well, the thing with your painting, of course, in any of this, you need to start at the top and work your way down. If you start at the bottom, you're just bringing mess in on what's new. So I think that go with that first and try to figure out what you want to do with the ceiling. And but I know there's different types of ceiling tiles, is all I was saying, and different grades of them, and some are more moisture resistant than others, and that might be a simple solution.
It's safe for y'all to walk through there on the way out. You can look and turn the lights on to see the improvements the LEDs made. The ceiling tile really make it look bad because they're all mismatched. None of them are the same. They're rain stained, sagging. We've been in there cleaning the track, the actual track that holds the tile up, the last couple of days. And we've been weed eating and working in other areas, kind of waiting on a rainy day to get in here and do some painting. But we want to get those ceiling tile addressed before we go too much further.
Any other comments? Have anything further, Mr. Salih, on these improvements?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Very informative. I appreciate the work that you and your people are doing there. Thank you. Mr. Oliver, the county museum space, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to update us. We had hoped, of course, to have the museum done by now, but COVID and everything else has been a hang up. But what I need to do is actually walk through there with Cliff, because the county has a lot of stuff stored in there and I can't do anything to get all that out. But most of the work that I'm planning on doing in there, the Historical Society is going to do ourselves, you know, but I don't know what kind of problem my ceiling is. I hadn't noticed my ceiling. We may have a ceiling problem too, or I may let you experiment on my ceiling and, you know, and see what happens. But if I can get the county to move some stuff out, then we can go ahead and start painting and moving in our display cabinets and stuff like that. And we'll just do all that ourselves, and we're under no time frame. I'd like to have it done by this next July 4th, but it's just up to us. It's all volunteer labor, so we're just going to work as we can. I just wanted to make you guys know we're still working on it, but I can't do anything until I get some junk taken out that belongs to this county.
Mm-hmm. So need to, main thing, get it cleaned out for you then. Any questions for Mr. Oliver? Hearing none, we'll move on to our last item here, the potential jail, justice center, and sheriff's department. Mr. Mayor, would you like to start with addressing this issue?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I printed out the jail needs assessment that was done by the County Technical Assistance Services jail consultant, Mr. Jim Hart. And that was submitted to the County Corrections Partnership Committee. That's the committee we put together in cooperation with the Tennessee Corrections Institute. That's a program they have to help communities when they're looking at a new jail. Mr. Hart did the assessment, submitted this report, and we're going to go through it a little bit. I'm going to kind of hit highlights, and then we can go back and answer questions that come up. This has already been through steering committee, and they sent it to just law enforcement and building committee. Law enforcement heard it, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, something like earlier, and heard it in August. So we're going to go start on page 2. It's part of the executive summary. Should be the 3rd paragraph down where it says current challenges. So the average daily population has stayed below the maximum capacity for the facility over the last 10 years. However, when they're looking at jails, they use an operating capacity of 85% and figure that as the full capacity. And the reason for that is to permit inmate classification and population surges. And except for 2014, the jail had routinely exceeded that 85% capacity between 2011 and 2016. And as we go through further in the report, we'll get into some of these where they're talking about inmate classifications and what could cause population surges. Then also right now, due to COVID-19, an issue that came up is they couldn't sufficiently quarantine off people being brought into the jail. So they were using the holding cells at the Justice Center as a quarantine, COVID-19 quarantine for inmates. On the next page, should be on where it says overview of the Charleston County Jail. You look at the 2nd paragraph. So there's currently no programming space. Any programs offered are conducted by volunteers standing in hallways and speaking with inmates through gates. And also due to flooding at the back of the facility, the outside recreation yard is deteriorating. I think the sheriff brought it. I don't remember if it's for this committee or law enforcement. And I reached out to T-Deck because he was wanting to go in there and do some repairs on that bank. And I reached out to T-Deck and they pretty much said, we fall under a general permit. He could go ahead and do it without getting anything further. So they should be able to go ahead and do those repairs, but it still has other issues beyond that. There's a tree there that had facilitated an escape of an inmate and it's not very big. It's kind of not sufficient for a recreation yard. The next paragraph down, last sentence says, over the last 10 years, approximately 39% of the jail's population has consisted of state inmates. That is the, we get funds every year to house state inmates. I think we have a contract with them. I think we have a maximum of 15 inmates. I think is what the contract is. And our average daily population has not exceeded the rated capacity of the facility from 2010 through 2020. However, the average daily population is the total that it can hold, whereas you've used the 85% capacity, as it said a few paragraphs before. We have exceeded that pretty regularly from 2011 through 2016. We offer minimal programs at the jail, and that's due to a lack of programming space. And the sheriff has looked at and wants to add adequate space in any new facility so they can provide life support skills, self-help, and job training opportunities. One of the things that he and I had talked about, has been done in other counties, is they go into jails and they create what a kind of a work release program, and has other programs that they work with that. In that program, an inmate can, let's say, go out and work for an employer for a certain part of the day, and then they'll come back into the jail and go through, it might be drug and alcohol counseling, it might be mental health counseling, it could be counseling on how to handle finances and whatnot. In Gibson County, they put in a program like that, and their recidivism rate from the program participants went from approximately 80% down to, I think, 8%. So they saw a significant drop in recidivism through that population. And this is kind of a direction that Governor Lee is pushing the communities to go. They actually created an incentive program that if you meet, I think it's class 1, you'll get $3 a day additional on top of what your contract rate is for the state to house inmates. And if you offer enough classes, you'll fall into, I think it's class 2, and there'll be an additional $6 per day per inmate if you have those services in there. And again, it's eyed towards reducing your population through reducing recidivism. Under population projections, it says the average daily population in the facility results from interaction of 2 issues. That's jails admissions and length of stay. And they have more data on that as we get further down into the report itself. And where they came up for some of their numbers as far as projections, they used several data groups, that being from the U.S. Census Bureau information, average daily inmate population, a thing called peaking factors, inmate classification needs, as well as special inmate needs. That'll be medical or mental health. You go to page 4, should be second paragraph down. So booking projections reflect an expected increase of over 1,100 persons annually by the year 2036. And it said that jail planning should include adequate booking, holding areas, property storage areas to support this increase. The booking, again, that's just when somebody's arrested and brought into the jail, and they process them in, take their photograph, put in the system what their arrest charges are. And then if they get bonded out by the judicial commissioner, or the judicial sets a bond and they can get out, that's when they'll process all that. Under the recommendations, second paragraph down from that says they should ensure that the new jail planning considers support needs. This will be a booking, sally ports, property storage, food service, laundry, delivery, loading docks, and other facility needs. So it needs to be included as part of future needs. Something that's kind of disconnected but is included in this report is a recommendation to establish a criminal justice coordinating committee that will identify inefficiencies as well as opportunities to develop a collaborative plans of action to enable the criminal justice system to operate more effectively. I spoke to Mr. Hart about that. He came to the County Corrections Partnership Committee, which is made up of stakeholders in the criminal justice. That's Judge Kane, Judge Linville, your district attorneys on that, your public defender, as well as jail staff and a member of the planning commission. And he thought that would be a good makeup for a criminal justice coordinating committee. So once we moved from going from the county corrections and working with the jail, he thought it'd be good just to change that focus of that group and make it the criminal justice coordinating committee. If we go further down in the report on page 5, should be the last paragraph, should be a subsection D. And it just kind of goes over through kind of conversations. He asked me about my thoughts on the housing of additional inmates. And by that, he meant state inmates. Some communities, they'll go in and when they design a jail, they want to increase the number of beds specifically to house more state inmates. I've been to several conferences where they have really been adamant about do not do that, do not count on receiving state inmates. And the reason for that is it fluctuates very, very wildly. A few months ago, maybe even 5 to 6 months ago, the Tennessee Department of Corrections came into Smith County and took 30 of their state inmates because they had seen such a decrease due to COVID, and they had not been transferring inmates due to COVID. So once they saw the COVID numbers decrease, to go ahead and start filling their beds back up, they started pulling from the county jails where they had state inmates housed, and they took 30 from Smith County. Well, that's 30 inmates per day, figure what, 36, 37, maybe $38 a day per inmate. That was a significant hit to them. So due to those factors, they strongly suggest you do not build a facility with figuring X number of beds just to be specifically for state inmates. They say you need to figure out what your actual needs are and plan based on that. Don't plan on some kind of guaranteed state revenue, because your problem, that's not going to be a good bed in the long run. Next page will be page 6, has a listing of what he feels the current challenges are. And those are mainly that it is an aging facility. You're looking at an increased inmate population due to the growth in the community. You have a lack of adequate types of housing to support housing and separating inmates by their individual risks and needs. Those risks could be medical, could be one inmate in the jail is a member of one certain gang and another's a member of another gang. Could just be classifications of the inmates. Some of them are more dangerous than the other ones, and you want to try to separate those out. And again, as I mentioned further in the report, if you look under that subsection C, it says the average daily population stayed below the maximum capacity of the facility. However, again, using that 85% operating capacity to prevent for inmate classification and population surges every year except 2014, between 2011 and 2016, the inmate population routinely exceeded that 85% capacity. Down on page 7, there'll be section H, subsection I. Again, they recommend a criminal justice coordinating committee. And the reason for that committee is basically look to see if there's things we can do. He was very complimentary of what we do here on the local level. He said our judicial commissioners were very available and responded quickly. There are some communities where you'll have someone brought in on a warrantless arrest and they don't get taken in front of a judicial commissioner from anywhere between 48 to 72 hours. Well, once you get near that 72-hour mark, you're having constitutional concerns. So he said our judicial commissioners respond very quickly, and there's a graph later on where you can see this broken down by kind of percentage of inmates that come through, that there's not a vast majority, but a big significant part of them are housed less than 1 day because they're seen by the judicial commissioner pretty early and either bonded out or ROR'd or something like that. So he was very complimentary. He thought as far as what he's seen, we had a very efficient system here in Trousdale County. He thought that has really benefited our inmate population to keep that down as low as it has been right now. So he thought if we could just continue that forward, and as well as looking at some of these programs to reduce recidivism, he thought we had a good basis to go ahead and try to address some of those challenges in the future. And we look on page 8, he kind of goes through some of the things he mentioned earlier. He kind of goes through just some general history of the facility. It's a single story, built in 1956, had an additional 32 bed, constructed on in 1992. Again, due to space limitations, there is no inmate programming space. Again, this is done through volunteers kind of standing out in hallways. And he once again mentions the problems with the outdoor recreation area on the backside of the facility and the damage done to it due to flooding. And then again, in subsection E here, kind of goes over the average daily population not exceeding the 85%. Or excuse me, I haven't really went over that average daily population capacity during the years. However, if you look at that 85% as full capacity, because it gives you a little bit of leeway to move inmates around due to classification factors, we did routinely exceed that 85% capacity. If you have that capacity, that'll allow you to absorb inmates coming in. And maybe in surges, you know, some communities will have whether it's a drug bust that's been organized by the drug task force. We have a large number of people that are arrested at one time due to some kind of sting operation, or sometimes you just have a lot of probation violations that are brought in at the same time. You'll have a surge in your population, and if you don't have some kind of available space, then you're going to have problems with your inmate population and doing proper classifications. And further down on page 9, it talks about under section F, subsection 4, says due to the aging of the facility, a major upgrade of plumbing is required. And then there's been some other problems, jail security. There's an electronic door panel system that operates the main gate inner housing area. And they were using keys to access that. I know there was one time there were some problems with some, I guess the locks on the jail cells. I believe those have been corrected, but there's just some of the issues with the aging facility. And he talks about when you're looking at your jail, and this is something we've asked them to do, is your staffing for your jail is your largest cost. And he looked at our budget and he said approximately 72% of our FY 2021 budget consisted of staff costs. And any new jail planning has to take into consideration potential for staffing increases. And at that County Corrections Partnership Committee, he said there is a service that CTAS can do, and that basically be a staffing analysis of the current jail, and then a projection of what any new facility based on projections he's got in here is inmate population, what that staffing might need to be in the future, and then you can kind of figure costs as you go into that. On page 11, be section K. So the jail has been averaging 42 inmates in custody over the last 10 years. Again, he reiterates that the expert suggested jail at its capacity is at its capacity when it reaches approximately 85% of its bed space. It says for Trousdale County, the current facility target capacity would be 37. There'd be 32 male beds and 5 female beds. Then on the next page, it'll be page 12. He looked at a 10-year period. And he said during that period, again, approximately 39% of the population was inmate population, and those were state inmates awaiting bed space at the Tennessee Department of Corrections. It says if your review of TDOC monthly snapshot reports over the same period reflects a statewide average of 16.35% of all inmates housed in county jails being classified as TDOC backups. So we're a little bit over what the normal is. I believe one of the reasons Sheriff Russell mentioned at the time or in conversations with me is the state, we've routinely scored really high on facility inspections and whatnot. So they really like our facility. And so they've been kind of, I won't say generous, but they do send us some state inmates. Again, some of those are TDOC backups that they're only here for a certain amount of time before they're classified and sent to another facility. Getting on to page 13 is where he starts talking about inmate capacity, and you start going over projections. And you see there's a graph he's got on here. It's figure 2, kind of shows your total capacity. He's got it in this graph form. Your red is your males, and it kind of it's broken up between your 85% capacity and your overall capacity. You see your males there kind of going back and forth over the line. And on the lower section, it's kind of your female capacity. That is kind of going over, because when that extension was built on, or the addition was built on in the 1990s, they did not build any female beds onto it. So one of the things that's been not just here, but in other communities, when they did jails, they did not build on female space. And we have seen an increase in female population across the state. So that's been an issue there, taking away beds from the male population. Says there's no formal advocacy program for inmates with serious mental health issues to assist them with their legal proceedings. Again, this is something Governor Lee and is looking at as far as criminal justice reform, and other groups are looking at as well, is trying to divert people that have serious mental health issues or have drug dependency issues, try to divert them into programs to work with them instead of housing them in the jail, to try to divert them in programs so they can get assistance. And because once they go into jail, it drastically increases the number of people who stay below the poverty line due to whatever factors you look at. So most of them are already low income, lose jobs, lose driver's licenses and whatnot. So it really sets them behind. I've actually had one client of mine tell me he'd rather get a 4-year jail sentence than be on a 2-year probation, because you can flatten out and do your jail sentence. However, being on that 2-year probation with all the things they can violate you on, he said it becomes just like a revolving door. You never get off of it. And they can keep extending your probation out. So you can get a 2-year probation, and as long as they keep violating you, your actual probation time could be up to 4 years. So that's something they're looking at, try to reduce that I want to say a defect in the system. That's my opinion. Going on your inmate projections, again, this will be on page 14. You looked at projecting the booking workload, and that's an anticipated release workload. It has the potential for a 70% increase in the number of bookings by the year 2041. And there's a table here. He shows what the average booking rate was in 2011, and then it goes all the way up to 2041. He's got projected bookings. Your booking rate, like it says, in 2011 was 101.8. He projects bookings in 2022 to be 1,024, reaching 1,131 by the year 2041. You go looking at some of your bookings coming in. It says the jail provided a count of 26 inmates and a combination of another 29 citizens or employees booked into the jail from the prison. Additionally, another 12 inmates were booked in and held at the jail upon release from prison while awaiting being picked up on punitive warrants from other jurisdictions. So the jail was not able to produce any data reflecting how many inmates from the prison were transported to court. And that's usually because when they transport them to court, if TDOC does it, they keep them in a van in the parking lot. They never enter the jail here. And that, again, as we get further into the report, he's going to say that is a security problem, having them kept in a van out in the parking lot instead of inside of a secured facility. And that has been an issue with some of our cases coming into the system, or they're coming out of the prison over here, whether that's, as you've seen in the reports, there's some staff there that get arrested for smuggling contraband into the facility or other things, and that's creating new cases here that have to be dealt with. The next page, which will be page 15, it kind of goes through your inmate length of stay. And he's got a kind of a pie chart here in figure 3. You see 48% of the days in custody were 1 day. So that's one of the reasons he said we're seeing pretty good numbers in our our inmate population right now, that it hasn't been too excessive, is that 48% of the rest for people booked into the jail stay less than 1 day. And another 32% are staying between 2 to 7 days. So once you get beyond that, you see smaller parts of your population. So that's where he commended our local system here, where the judges, judicial commissioners, really addressing some of these issues up front and reducing the amount of time that the inmates spend inside the facility. And even that is the case when the time he did this report, if you look on the section W there, it says when he did this report, at the time there were currently 376 outstanding criminal warrants to be served. So that's where you get into, we talked about your population surges, whether it's probation violations or could be drug task force doing like a sting operation where they do a lot of inmates, or just outstanding criminal warrants. It's not unusual to have a lot more outstanding warrants ready to be served than you have beds in your jail. You keep going in further and you look at your pretrial or judicial diversion. This would be table 11, it'll be on page 16. Pretrial judicial diversion, that's something you're trying to take more advantage of. However, it does take a little bit more time to get those records and everything in place. And it's got going through our history here. In 2011, 2012, we had 19 And that decreased to 2019, 2020 down to a level number 4. And that would be out of a total of 253 total dispositions throughout the year in your courts. And that dispositions means that case is done away with, and whatever, if it's a sentence that's imposed or case is dismissed or whatever the case may be, it is disposed of. And we had 253 in 2019, 2020. Out of that 253, 4 of them were done away with by either pretrial or judicial diversion. He mentions a program in Shelby County called the Jericho Project, and they formed collaborations with local mental health agencies, the district attorney's office, the public defenders, the courts, along with the jail, to form a program that would divert mentally ill offenders from jail to treatment. And that is something, again, Governor Lee has talked about, and he's got a task force that's recommending some of those things. And I think as we go forward, you're going to see more push on that side of your criminal justice reform, is try to divert inmates that have mental health issues or substance abuse issues into a treatment program rather than housing them inside a jail. As we keep going down further, he talks about, you look at your top 3 cases filed, and this will be from 2012 to 2019. Your number 1 case is going to be involving drugs. Your number 2 is probation violations, and 3rd is burglary or theft. Again, that's where people have looked at your inmate populations, and if you can deal with some of these people who have substance abuse issues or mental health issues, which there is a large number of people that get arrested for drug possession and whatnot that have undiagnosed mental health issues, and they're self-medicating through taking these drugs, or some of them have never been diagnosed whatsoever, and some of them just can't afford the medication. And we can get them in programs to help reduce that recidivism, get those treatments in place, and get them into treatment that will reduce our jail population and our court caseloads. And look at table 13, it kind of breaks down, this is your misdemeanors in custody. You look at 2020, again, 2020 was kind of an off year due to COVID and reducing your population and courts shutting down. At that time, you had 8 in pretrial inmates being held, and when they looked at it, and 5 were sentenced. And that's where you see in some of your inmate population is being retained is some of these pretrial cases, specifically pretrial misdemeanors. And those are people that maybe can't afford bond to get out, can't be reduced or released on recognizance due to past criminal issues, and can't afford bond to get out. I've had one inmate before that couldn't afford $100 to get out of jail, and he had no family or friends to pay for it. So he sat in jail. And we have issues like that as well. And you looked at our programs we currently offer, and this is at the bottom of page 18. It says Charleston County Jail offers minimal inmate programming opportunities. And these do include Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. There's volunteer church programs or pastors that come in there. And then there's a program called Paytail, and that's a self-paced online program that can be accessed by use of tablets or kiosks. There are some release work details from the jail for the men. That would be litter pickup, lawn mowing, and wash patrol vehicles. For females, that would be cleaning the pods. Because there are currently no inside jail trustee programs. Correction staff do all cooking, laundry, and common area cleaning. These work details were terminated due to potential for inmate contraband trafficking. The sheriff has indicated both to me and Mr. Hart that he would like to see a way to increase program opportunities in a new jail space. And he kind of compared our inmate population here on page 19. If you look at table 14, he compared our inmate population and jail size to other counties across the state. We kind of fall in the middle where you looked at. The smallest was Lake County at 7,360 citizen population, and jail size is 40. Our jail size population count is 44, and the largest he looked at was Meigs County, and that was 56. So there was an average, all of them, of 52. And our inmate count at a 44. Inmate count on May 5th, 2021 was 24. And incarceration rate was per 1,000 people would be 2,100, 2.14. There was some questions asked at the steering committee, and I think Mr. Jewell asked some of these questions at the County Corrections Partnership Committee. When we get down to the jail population projections, some of the questions asked was over where they got the numbers for the citizen population of the county, and that data came from the Census Bureau, a part of the University of Tennessee. Again, now that we have the census numbers that have been released, these are going to be revised. Mr. Hart said those would go back and be revised. And the numbers he got in their population projections here in table 15 for 2020, they projected 11,211 county population. We now know that the census, that was 11,615 was the census number. One of the issues, and this is something I think I mentioned to Mr. Hart at a recent conference he was at, I mentioned this, and I've mentioned it to several groups. One of the problems with the census population for counties or locations that have a jail is census counts your inmates for a prison. And the reason is because they meet the definition of resident under the census regulations. Prison rights groups have tried to get them to change those so that inmates account from where they came from, not the location where they're at, but as of right now, they count. So of our 11,615, a sizable part of that is going to be your inmate population. I don't know what that number is because I don't know what the number of the inmates populations were at Trousdale Turner on the specific day they were counted. I am going to reach out to the new warden at the jail to see if he knows what that number is. So they should have reported to the census. So I would hope they still have that number. If we can take that 11,615, subtract that inmate population, I think that will change your projection as far as your inmate populations, because it's based on that total number, not taking into account that over 2,000 people in our population are housed at Trousdale Turner. Before COVID, the previous warden told me 2,500 was pretty good inmate population as far as an average. At one point during the pandemic last year, it got her down to around 2,100. So I don't know what date that census was taken. I suspect it was closer to the 2,100 number than the 2,500 number. I think that's where we lost some census numbers there, was due to that decrease in population due to COVID. But again, I don't know what was attributable to that. I would like to get that number, as I said, because I would like to take that inmate population at Trousdale Turner and subtract that from our 11,615. And then when you look at your male citizen population that is not housed at Trousdale Turner, you can use your incarceration rate to figure out what your projected male population is going to be out to 2041. And I think doing that is going to bring the number that was actually in the report down a little bit. That is not unusual to this report. That happens in our Moody's. When they were rating us on our bonds, we had to let them know that when they were looking at our median income, we've got a sizable number of people at the prison, and actually had to put in a paragraph saying that could skew your median income numbers, that those people out of prison don't earn income. So that has popped up in several things and has been discussion on a lot of different things during the grants and other things like that, having to let these different government agencies or other groups know that our population does include between 2,100 and 2,500 people at a prison. And so that does play into it. One of the reasons you use 85% as a full capacity number is what they use as what's called a peaking factor. Again, that is what you're looking at when you see a surge in population. As I said earlier, that could be to a variety of factors. That could just be for a lot of people getting probation violations. You know, you'll have circuit court comes about every 4 months. You have circuit court comes in, and all of a sudden you've got 8, 9 people that get probation violation, go to jail. You're going to see a surge in your population at that time. Or it could be just they have a group that go out and they're serving a lot of warrants at the time and making a lot of arrests, and you'll see a surge there. Also, if you do not exceed 85% or have, try to go to a maximum of 85%, that allows you to do different classifications of inmates due to medical or mental health needs. And also, if you have 2 inmates that just don't get along and are going to harm each other, that will allow you space to separate them out. Or it can also be space to separate Crips and Bloods or whatever else. So that is a big problem inside jails, is different gang affiliations, and housing them together does create significant problems as far as violence inside jails. Get down onto page 22. Look at your table. Here's where you're getting into your inmate populations. Table 16, that is your female population. You don't really see a tremendous rise in that in 2021. I said total estimated beds required was 7, project out in 2041 as 12. There were some questions raised, I believe, at the steering committee when they want to know, well, if you're seeing a tremendous spike in your male population, why don't you also see that in your female population? Again, I think it's because your male population, there's a sizable number of that's attributable to Trousdale Turner. I think if you adjust for that, your inmate population, you adjust your inmate male population down to account for that, I think you'll see some of these numbers come down. Again, that's something I talked to Mr. Hart about. And now that we have census numbers, we'll get that information from Trousdale Turner and see if we can adjust those numbers down and see if that makes a difference in your bed populations. Because for your male population, right now, he said your total estimated space requirements in 2021 was 36 and projects up to 89 in 2041. Again, that's using a total population of 11,215. And I believe that was, if you look at your male population, and I'm going to backtrack to another table we looked at earlier, and this is on page 20, that's table 15. If you look at the difference between your year 2017 and year 2018, as far as your county citizen population and your male citizen population, you'll see an increase of over 2,000 people. I think it's around 2,300 and something from 2017 to 2018. That is Trousdale Turner beginning to take inmates. So that's why you see an increase, a drastic increase there in 1 year. So again, I think if we adjust for that, those numbers at the prison, I think you may see our bed projections in the future come down somewhat. But as it is currently stated, looking at your bed space, he thinks you'll need a total estimated bed space of 105 as you get out future. Again, I'm sorry, let me go down to, this is specifically stated a little bit further down in the report. And this will be on table 22 on page 25. And he breaks it down different types of housing for different things. There's some examples of dormitory of 10 beds for exterior work details, another dormitory of 10 beds for inside work details. Pod 3 says 2-person cells, total number 10 beds for medical special needs, 11 beds for restrictive housing, 24 beds for medium security, and then 24 beds for medium and low security, for a total male beds of 89. And then for females, he said you'll need a mixture of single and 2-person cells to allow segregation due to medical and special needs of 4, 6 2-person cell beds, and then another 6 for medium custody. He thinks you'll need a total of female beds of 16. So total beds between male and female population of 105. Again, I think when you adjust for your Trousdale Turner figuring into your population, I think the 89 number will come down. What it's going to come down to, I don't know. That's going to depend on what the number Trousdale Turner gives us as far as what the census population was for 2020. One of the things that was discussed a little bit in this report, but was discussed pretty much in depth at the County Corrections Partnership Committee, was a request from that committee that when we look at this new jail, we actually look at a criminal justice complex, not just a new jail. Some of the restrictions on our current site is that there are some security problems. We do not have sufficient space in our justice center right now to house inmates coming in from TDOC. They're housed outside in the parking lot in a van. That creates security problems. Where the jail and the justice center are separate, you have to walk inmates across an open parking lot. On the day Mr. Hart was there, he saw one inmate that was being held for murder, walked across the parking lot, and that creates security problems. Also, with the way the cells are in there, he said your line of sights are not good for security issues. Not only that, but there have been times when you have 4 courts going on in 2 courtrooms in the facility. So that's created problems there. So the judges, district attorney, public defender all asked that when we're looking at this, we look at building a criminal justice facility, which will have new courtrooms, space for criminal court clerk, storage, which is currently lacking in the facility. They still have to use the storage here for their criminal court records, as well as there's not adequate space for attorney-client meetings and other things that need to be included in a criminal justice complex. So that's pretty much the needs report and request from the County Corrections Partnership Committee. We can go over any questions now at the time. I know there's probably going to be several. I'll try to adjust one, but the main question was the inmate population. And I went back and looked at it, and I think some of your projection numbers there, as far as a drastic increase in your male population, again, is due to Trousdale Turner inmates being included in your population numbers and not segregated out separately.
Any comments or questions for the mayor?
Yeah, whoever did this do a good job. This is
Well,
excellent, yeah.
Again, this is Mr. Hart. He is the jail consultant for County Technical Assistance Service. I've tried to get him to see if we can get him to come to more of these committees. However, he is currently serving as not only the jail consultant, he is now the interim head of programs for CTAS, doing their, whether it's their programs where they do training for county commissioners or mayors or something like that. So he's serving in that role now. So he's doing 2 jobs at once. So that's created a little bit of a backlog in his calendar. And there was a question that came up, and I just now remembered it, about if we build this new criminal complex, what are we going to do with the current Justice Center? And I would suggest we do like Wilson County. You know, they have a criminal justice complex that has a jail, courts, sheriff's department, everything built onto it, which is what we would suggest here. And they have a separate civil courts facility that's down the street at a converted church complex. We would do that here. You would still see your civil circuit court, your chancery court, and juvenile court would still be at the Justice Center over here. And all your criminal cases would be at this new criminal justice complex. And I did forget to mention, but it would be also have a new sheriff's department built onto that as well to make it one facility. Because if you go to places, particularly the one I've had most experience with is Macon County, all that is in one facility. So when they're brought in, if there's questions or anything like that, your detectives, your sheriff's department, all your personnel's in one place. They're connected onto the jail. And I've had several instances where an inmate was scheduled to be in court. One of my clients, they didn't bring him over, but I could go back in the jail, be buzzed in, go back and forth between him and the district attorney. And we were able to work out agreements and get cases disposed of because I was able to go to the jail, access that, and have discussions with my client and go back and forth. We were able to resolve some cases that way. Plus, you have the added benefit is they never leave the secured facility, whereas right now they do.
Thank you. There's no doubt that it would be good if we could do the criminal justice center at the same time we do the jail. I guess the only concern in my mind is how to pay for it. I guess the state's going to tell us we've got to have a jail at some point, but I don't guess they're mandating that we have a criminal justice center. And so, you know, can we pay for it? It'd all be nice if we can afford it, but can we pay for it?
As we go forward, again, one of the things we need to do is we need to get an engineering firm on board because some of these questions that are going to be asked until we have an engineering firm or somebody look at it, give you more hard numbers. I don't know what that cost is going to be. The numbers I've been using based on what I've seen is the cost of building a jail with the size they estimated is probably somewhere between 20 to 25 million. Now you can spread that out over 40 years. There are programs out there. I've talked to TCI that would maybe help us pay for that. There is a program that's little used under TDOC, and I don't know that they'd be willing to use it, is that if you enter into a contract with the state for a certain amount of time, they will basically help you pay for your jail, but you've got to agree to house inmates for a certain amount of inmates for a certain period of time. Again, in discussing with people, I don't think TDOC is too keen to use that provision of state law. But as far as paying for it, we did get CoreCivic is paying us now $300,000 in administrative fee. I would suggest using that to go towards payment of any bond issues or anything like that going forward, any debt on building this new jail. There has been discussion on keeping the wheel tax, or I need to rephrase that. The current wheel tax is going to go away no matter what you do. The way it was structured is it's going to end once that school's paid off, and that's going to be here in May of next year. The discussion was to create a new wheel tax that would be used to pay for this facility. So if you could pair that with your 300,000, and then maybe some of these programs out there, I've had talked to USDA, they do have some facilities funds that they can have that we could access that would have, some of it would be loan forgiveness if we meet certain qualifications. So there's potential there that if we get financed through USDA, meet certain qualifications, some part of that debt could be forgiven. But I think that's something as we go forward in the process, that's going to have to most certainly be included in the, as we go forward, is what is going to be the amount of the jail, how you're going to pay for it going forward. So I'm not suggesting that we just go ahead and all commit and we're going to do this right now, but I do think this is what we need to look at, and we need to start putting in place the mechanism to get these questions answered.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't sit on law enforcement, and I wasn't able to make their last committee meeting. Is there anything, since this issue concerns law enforcement and the building committee, is there anything that we need to be doing in conjunction with them that came out of their last meeting?
Right now, they just met and they didn't make any recommendations or anything going forward. Again, my recommendation is we need to look at getting an engineering firm on board sometime soon. I do have a meeting on Friday with a group that may be willing to help us on something. I don't want to disclose too much right now because I'm not really sure what they're offering at this point, but I'm going to meet with them, as well as Mr. Beller is going to meet with them. Mr. Beller and I are going to meet with them on Friday, and I'm going to send out some updates on that once we know kind of what it is they're offering going forward, that they said they could help us save cost on the jail. So once we have that meeting, have more information, I'll have a little bit better idea of where we need to go, and that could include engineering services as well, but I'm just not really sure.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any other comments in regard to this topic? Do we have any other business that should come before the meeting?
Let's get a little bit of update. I could have talked about it on the courthouse improvements. I did have Mike Carey go downstairs, and we did run more internet connections throughout the building. That was number one, because this building is the backup administration building under our county's disaster preparedness plan. So we wanted to get more services out from that. The election commission had certain services they were needing inside their space due to security reasons and requirements. They needed some hardwired internet access instead of being on Wi-Fi. And we have had several groups requesting use the downstairs courtroom that would need internet access. And so we increased the number of access points in there as well. One of the groups I'm talking to is our area workforce development board. Their adult education classes currently meet in a classroom building behind the high school. They would like to move out of that space. The schools would like to move out of that space. And I did offer using that downstairs courtroom, and they were very interested in it. We're going to try to set up a time for them to come and look at it and see if they thought it would be suitable or if we need to make any changes. One of the changes I would like to do in that space is go in there and take the bench and everything out and make it a more spacious room. The election commission, working with Mr. Paxton, had a disability law and advocacy center representative come and look at it. That center is the one that usually sues you for ADA violations. Came and looked at the courthouse, recommended that the downstairs courtroom be the early voting site due to how spacious and wide the doors were. He thought that was more accessible for people in wheelchairs. One of the questions or criticisms from the election commission was that there's only one door in and out. Mr. Slee and I went and looked at it along with Mr. Paxton. If we take that bench out, we can use that second door that goes into the former clerk and master's office, and that can be a second exit to that space. So that was something I would like to look at, is basically taking the bench and everything out and basically widen that room out a little bit. And then, like I said, I've had several groups want to make use of that space, mainly for classrooms or something like that, or to do some kind of community service projects.
thank you, Mayor. Any other comments in regard to that? Do we have any public comments? Seeing none, would entertain a motion to adjourn. Have a motion by Mr. Nolan. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Buckmaster. All in favor, say aye. We stand adjourned.